Good morning. Sorry for the delay. We had a board meeting working on West Baltimore, East Baltimore, some other issues. But nonetheless, top of the day to you. A little nippy outside. This is the Donnie Glover Show right here on BlackUSA.news. Do check out our website. We put the shows that we broadcast 7 days a week. We put them right on our website, BlackUSA.news. It's always a beautiful day when we get to talk to Sons of Baltimore. And this next gentleman, yesterday we talked with who the heck did we have yesterday? But today we got Brother Romy. We talked to so many people. Today we got Brother Romeo Joyner-EL, and we'd like to welcome him to the show. Definitely a son of Baltimore. I first met this brother when we were doing work at the jail. How you doing, Brother Romeo?
Great. How's your day, Brother Glover?
Man, I'm grateful. It's always good when we got a native son on the line. Tell them who you are.
Yeah, I'm Romeo Joyner-EL, Grand Sheik of the Moore Science Temple of America, Temple Number 7, Rosedale, Maryland. Longtime resident of Baltimore City, raised on both sides, East and West Baltimore. And it's always a pleasure to talk to the people, because the glory of a king is the welfare of his people. His power and dominion rest on the hearts of his subjects. So if you're serving to the people, and I am, heavy is the head, the way is the crown. Good morning.
Brother Romeo, I don't know if you noticed, but my second book is out. Shameless self-promotion. It's called I Am Black Wall Street. And I look at how those people got to Oklahoma.
Right.
I found that some came from Florida, Chief John Horse, and then some also came from Kansas.
Yes.
And so the leader up there in Kansas, believe it or not, that I highlight is a white man named Captain John Brown.
All right.
But as I look at the history of places like Tulsa's Black Wall Street, I realized and identified that there were black towns, or what I refer to as freedom colonies, all across the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something that's taught to us often, if at all, in schools. One of the things I highlight in the book, that the first Africans that came here during slavery was not in 1619, but was in 1525.
All right.
North America was maybe 100 plus years, 150 years behind South America, which had slavery pretty fluid. Brazil, all through South America. We when we think of slavery, we just think United States.
Right.
We don't know, weren't taught, don't realize that it was massive. But we also not taught that wherever there was slavery, there was some type of pushback.
Yes.
Anywhere the slavery was, and I'm speaking in the Western Hemisphere, whether it was the Caribbean, South America, Central America, North America, wherever there was slavery, best believe there was a Romeo Joyner-EL fighting back.
Yes.
But then I want to go back a little bit further, and that's where we're going to pick up the story. 1492. That's the year that they identified Christopher Columbus as coming across the water. Now, this conversation, big brother, is going to go over some people's head, But for me, especially in the midst of this whole, what do they call it? Critical race theory.
Yes.
For me, it's critical to be factual. And the one thing I want to ask you about is what was happening, because they always talk about 1492. That's like the hard beginning.
Right.
As if Christopher Columbus, after Spain and Portugal get on their feet, so to speak, how did Spain, because Spain was ahead of Portugal, France, England in terms of coming across these waters, if I'm not mistaken. They were
Yes.
in the ships first. What was going on in Europe right before this slave trade kicked off?
Okay. First, I'd like to begin by introducing to some and presenting to others what we call the Moors, Moors. The Moors were from Africa. They were from Morocco, which today you have two parts. You have the Morocco Oro and you have Fez. Prior to that, during the 6th century, the Moors ruled Spain from 711 until 1492. The Moors ruled Spain, France, Germany, England, Portugal, and Spain. They walked in on the Iberian Peninsula. So when these Moors showed up prior to their existence or their arrival, Europe was in a state of really a state of darkness. They didn't have any spices. They didn't have any irrigation for water. They didn't have any lights, and they pretty much were living pretty backwards. But what the Moors introduced to them was lights, irrigation, medicine, the seasoning of their foods, because certain spices they didn't have. So, with that being said, that was the Dark Ages. The spirit of light, the actual period of enlightenment is when the Moors showed up and rescued them. Because prior to that, they were living in caves. They didn't have any irrigation system for their toilets or the waters. They had moats around the castle, so the waste from the human excrement caused a lot of disease, and they were living pretty bad. They were living pretty backwards. So prior to that, the people in Europe and all those other places, they didn't have the things that they have today. So the Moors were instrumental to bringing bathing and a lot of other cultural things like lighting, lights, irrigational systems, and some of the best universities that you see today were patterned after schools of the Moors. The Moors from Alhambra and Granada. So prior to 1492, Europe was flourishing. But right after they left, during the time of Christopher Columbus in 1492, they went back to the states that they were in, the state that they were in before the arrival of them. And that was when they had the Black Plague, and a lot of those diseases, typhoid fever and all of that. They pretty much went backwards. So the Moors brought a lot of culture and history to Europe. That's the whole continent. So that's one reason why today you can still see the influence of the Moors. As a matter of fact, evidence-based research has proven that when the Moors were there, they had a better system, a better military. They had a system of medicine that made them a lot better, and they lived longer when the Moors were there because of a lot of the different cultural practices that they brought. And as a result of that, Moors had traveled all over the world and conquered all kinds of people. So you can always see the influence. You can see it in Spain today. You can see it in Poland. You can see the Moorish influence and the faces on the coat of arms in Germany. There's a lot of the culture woven into the Merovingians and to the people of the Germanite people. So the Moors' influence was very popular prior to 1492. And after they were forced out by Ferdinand and Isabella, the king and queen of Spain, the Moors were dispersed all over the world. And then when they were dispersed all over the world, their influence could be found even in America today. There's one particular organization that you can find them in. It's called the Moorish Science Temple of America. And they kept a lot of the history, the dress, the religion, and also a lot of the different medicinal techniques and healing purposes, and also a lot of the laws. So it was really, and it's really important for the people to look at the Moors. And when you look at the Moors, it just didn't cover all so-called black people. The Moors were specifically a group of people that came from Morocco, which today is being split into two parts by the French, that being Fez, and Morocco Oro by the Spanish. So if there's any questions or any more information about that, you can read some books. You got a book called The Golden Age of the Moor. You have Othello's Children. You have a lot of different people. Ivan Van Sertima is the one that wrote The Golden Age of the Moors. Then Othello's Children is written by a brother named Jose Pimienta Bay. So
look, I wanna put this graphic up for a second. So I'm gonna pull you out for a second. Now, can you explain to us what these are?
Yes, that's the coat of arms of Germany that I spoke about earlier in Austria. See, the Moors were so very influential in the culture of the Europeans all over Europe, the English, the Scottish, and France and Austria, that they put our faces on the coat of arms in remembrance of us because we were fierce warriors. We had the knowledge and insight, and we were a great culture of people.
So you mean to tell me that these coat of arms, that those are black kings?
They're kings.
That's a black king.
They're what they call the sultans and the sheiks. That's where we get that from them. The sultans and the sheiks and the kings from the coats of arms. Even in Russia, the Moors ruled Russia. And if you're familiar with Pushkin,
Alexander Seregnev Pushkin, the father of Russian literature.
Right. He had a son they had a son named Peter. They called him Black Peter. And he used to sit on the knee of the Tsar. And he sat on his knee. And it was like, some people are superstitious. They would ask him to give him a blessing, place their hands on his head. And they're false. I've been blessed by St. Peter. It's all this kind of stuff because it was an old saying that if you saw a Moor in the first thing in the morning, they were superstitious. They said your day was going to be all right because we were a symbol of luck, prosperity, peace, and good fortune. Even legend has it that the leprechaun in Ireland resulted from being a Moor. That came from him.
I've heard they were the Twa, T-W-A, the Twa people.
There you go.
From Africa. Then
you had the Moors that were in Ireland. And when they were in Ireland, St. Peter was pushing out the snakes. That was emblematic of the Moors being removed from Ireland. The running of the bulls in Spain, the Moors being removed from Spain. So it was emblematical of getting them out, but they had that much impact on European culture.
So there were also not just these coat of arms, there were also statues of black Moors.
Yes. There's another history that I talk about a lot. I'm a practitioner and a teacher of the martial arts. I have black belts in two disciplines, one in Kempo and one in Goju Jiu-Jitsu. And one of the classes that I teach to my students to enter on the intermediate level as well as the beginners is that The art of the martial arts didn't come from Africa. It didn't come from China. Didn't come from Spain. I mean, it didn't come from China, Korea, or even Japan. It came from Africa through a man by the name of Bodahama, who was from Moorish blood. The samurai that they give reference to, his name is spelled Yusake.
Yasuke.
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 You can look him up. He had so much influence on the samurai that he was the number one man during the time.
I think he was from Mozambique.
And that's where they believe he was from. And this particular samurai had so much influence on the martial arts that, it was unbelievable. He was a Moorish blood. It's a whole lot of history about the Moors within the martial arts. Bodahama was so deep into the martial arts that they brought him in to save the Shaolin Temple. And as a result of him, they pay homage to him today. Here's what happened. There was one woman whose legend has it that she was the woman that was a nun, Nimai, the one that started the Wing Chun practice. She told this man that if he was so great, he could be able to turn the snow from white into red. So what Bodahama did is he cut off his arm. He cut off his arm and changed the snow from white into red. So from that day, 1 minute. So from that day, he the samurai, not the samurais, the monks in the boot in the Shaolin Temple, they wear one of their arms out, bare, and members of Bodahama. So and the Moors, they ruled Japan from the 6th century during the Ming dynasty, Ming, M-I-G, and they called them the Kunlu, which is translated in English to being the men from the vaults of heaven.
So I want you to help me out right here. So from 1492 moving forward, Americans are taught about Columbus,
but not the Moors.
And they're taught that Portugal and Spain financed Columbus to come across the Atlantic.
Right. And it was also funded through the Catholic Church.
Okay.
See,
but this is the point I'm getting to. If the Moors were running Europe up until 1492, if they had a dominant presence,
mm-hmm.
And in 1492, that's when Columbus started going across the Atlantic.
Right.
I talked about it in this book, and other scholars have talked about it long before me.
Right.
About the Moors who were on the ships.
Right. You know why?
Going across the Atlantic, it just says to me that they have been going across that Atlantic.
Sure, they have always been.
Is that?
That's correct. They've been the best navigators. As a matter of fact, the so-called pirates from Barbary Coast, they were Moors. They weren't shipwrecked thieves. They were traders that moved along that Atlantic coast. They went all over the world. They were the best navigators. As a matter of fact, you seen the movie Amistad?
Yes, Cinque.
Cinque was not just some ignorant slave that was on the ship.
No, he was
they were navigators on the seas.
Okay.
That's how they were able to get back and forth, because they were navigators. They were shipmen.
And they were Muslim. That was the first Hollywood film that showed Black Africans who went through enslavement who were Muslim. Because typically what's thrown on us, there's almost the assumption that all Blacks were Christians. But in Amistad, you saw them prostrating as they made prayer, as they made salat.
I got one better one for you. We all are familiar with, if not Amistad, with Roots. When the brother came over, they gave him the name of Toby. But before that, he was Muslim too, and he was a Muslim. He was a devout Muslim. And when the Brother Fiddler tried to get him to eat that pork. He said, "No, we don't touch that." So he was Muslim too.
I missed that. I missed that.
Yeah, he's Muslim too.
Kunta Kinte.
When they first tried to introduce the pork to him in the meal, he said, "No, we don't touch that." He said, "But this is all you got to eat. You got to eat this." And see, in Islam, if you don't have something other than,
you ain't got no choice.
You have no choice. It's better to sustain your life than, to try to stick to that dietary restriction, because that's the only thing you have. But it shouldn't be your first choice. So the culture of the Moors and the religion of Islam has always been there. It's been around much longer. The Christianity might have been around longer as whatever title being put on the faith, but the first Muslim in this world was Adam.
Okay, so look, I want to turn the heat up a little bit. In terms of Europe and Spain, Portugal, the Iberian Peninsula, in that 800 years that the Moors dominated, there was also that fight going on between Christianity and Islam, right?
Right.
Can you tell me a little bit about the Crusades?
Sure.
Because out of that, we are still experiencing the effects of that clash still today. Right. I mean,
right.
If on the news they say anything about the Middle East,
right.
Words that often follow are terrorists, extremists. We see the demonization, like when they went into Iraq, Saddam Hussein.
Right. It was all propaganda.
Gaddafi.
It was all propaganda, and it was misinformation to keep people divided. Look at the city of Jerusalem. In the city of Jerusalem, you had Jews, Christians, and Muslims that cohabitated. During that time, it wasn't no social media, wasn't no Skype, Facebook, Twitter, wasn't no TikTok, wasn't Facebook, none of that. And these people got along. They got along because it is a basic belief in the tenet of religion, the religion of Islam, that the Christians, the Sabians, and the Jews will have their day of judgment, as well as the Muslims, so they could coexist. A lot of this stuff is propaganda to split people, to divide them, and cause a whole lot of contention and wars. For example, in Tel Aviv, a lot of Muslims live in Tel Aviv in Israel. They live there, they're treated well. They show the other stuff to inflame people here to get them to join into the propaganda. When it came down to Muammar Gaddafi saw the plight of the so-called black people in America. I say so-called because the color black and them being called black is a social construct. It's not a material fact. You and I both know we're wearing a black shirt, which I'm wearing today. You won't find anybody from our race with this color or this hue because it's a social construct. In the religion of Islam, we're taught that black is symbolic of death and those who reject faith. It says in the day of judgment, the faces of the non-believers or the rejectors of the faith will be blackened. So we don't identify with that. We're taught in the Moorish science temple of black, according to science, means death. So we don't identify with that. So the so-called black people in America are not being taught their actual nationality, their religious creed, and therefore they have no connection, and the law supports it to the human family. Look at the Dred Scott decision, March the 6th, 1857. The case in a nutshell said that black people have no rights. They're white people bound and respect by law, and they're not citizens. So we have to examine the whole social dynamic of that. When it comes down to the tension between Muslims and Christians, should never happen because they coexisted before. It's in the Quran that you take up refuge with the Christians and not the Yehudis. So you can take it for what it is. There's a lot of it's propaganda and based on disbelief, it's based on misinformation and people being improperly educated. So that's where that's from.
What do we want more people to understand in terms of Moorish history?
We want people to understand their their true nature and their history. Because if we can get them to connect with their past, then they have a future. But if you don't have a past, you don't have a future. Most people who don't know who they are have no knowledge of self. They're the people who will result into other less conventional means of surviving. They're taught that they don't have any self-pride, any self-respect. They don't expect people to don't look like them because they don't know the history of us as a people. So when we incorporate that, we teach that, people are less likely to offend somebody that looks like them, and they have a sense of self-pride. They have a connection to the human family.
Who was Noble Drew Ali, and why is he important to the Moorish Science Temples of America?
Noble Drew Ali is the prophet of the Moorish Science Temple of America. He's the founder of that organization, and he's important to us because he's the first person that ever came to teach the people, the so-called black people of America, that they're not Negro, black, and colored, that they're Moors, and that they come there from a great culture. He taught them to be themselves. He was teaching them that their religion is Islam, and it teaches them to be able to coexist with other people, but at the same time knowing their own actual identity and nationality. Everybody else has a prophet. Why wouldn't we have one? See, because a prophet is a warner. He's one from among you that looks like you to speak your religion. For example, Muhammad was a prophet, but he was a prophet for the Arabs. Buddha was a prophet. He was a prophet from India. Confucius was a prophet. He came from China. So why wouldn't we have a prophet too? One that looks like us, born in the state of North Carolina, where most of us can trace our roots, and we can trace our roots there to North Carolina. And he came teaching us to be ourselves.
Is there any obligation on America to teach people who look like us our true history, or is it my responsibility? Is it your responsibility?
It's our responsibility too, because with us, we're supposed to teach every time an opportunity, presents itself. And when we teach, we ought to teach people out of love and not hate, and not teach them like that show any kind of contempt towards them. Because I didn't know what I know all the time. I learned about the Moorish Science Temple in 1989 when I joined through a brother, may Allah bless his soul, by the name of Robert Berry Bay. This brother, when I saw him, he walked into the room, he lit that room up. And I always liked him because he was outspoken, he was polite, and he was bold. This brother was seriously bold. And he always spoke with people. He looked them in the eye. He didn't look at them with either aggression or fear. And I said, there's something about this brother that I respect, and I'm going to learn more about it. So when I went to him and he would talk to me, one of the things he said to me, he says, your name's Romeo? And I said, yes. He says, Romeo, I got hope for you. He said, because you're a pretty sharp guy. He said, I want to ask you to come to a meeting, and I want you to come to this meeting, and I want you to just listen. He said, because I think it's something that you can learn from there. And the message to me is what I live by today, and I think it's a message that we ought to teach to our people. It says, if you have race pride and you love your people and you think their condition can be better, join the Moorish Science Temple of America. And I said, wait a minute now. I got race pride. I love my people, and I think the condition for them can be better. So I'm going to join this organization. And when I did, I saw it for what it presented to me, how I could be an integral part of the community, how I can teach people to be themselves and improving other people's quality of life and enhance mine. So it was a win-win situation. I was in. I'm still in. Because that message has to be taught by us as individuals, and it has to be taught to us in the history of us as a people. All of us weren't slaves. If you just tell a person that you come from slaves, that's not a real promising future.
Not all black people were slaves.
Not all
white people were free.
And not all of them were against black people.
Not all. Some white people help black people, including
were sympathizers. You know why? Because they identified with the principle of them being human beings. For
In my
example,
book, I talk about Captain John Brown, and
there
he
you
was
go.
he was a white man,
West Virginia, Harper's Ferry.
Harper's Ferry. So I,
That's
I
right.
I would be remiss, big brother.
Right. Let me get this for a second. I got to take this.
So we're gonna take a pause. We'll pull you off. Let me know when you're ready. We're talking with brother Romeo Bailey. Romeo Joyner-EL, and he's been involved with Moorish Science Temple of America, as he mentioned, since the late '80s. And for me, it's important that more of us know about the Moors. All throughout Europe, these are coat of arms around me. Those are coat of arms. You've seen those crests like on the famous not Wimbledon, the golf thing. They wear the little crest on their breast right there. These are crests, and they feature Moorish lineage, Moorish kingdoms, if you will, Moorish communities across Europe. And I've shared on my page many times the Moorish coat of arms from Ireland to Germany to Spain, Portugal, you name the country, as you see it. The Moors and Holy Roman empires in Germany and Austria, and you're talking about the 8th century, 12th century. But this history is never shared with us. We many of us have not even heard of blacks in Europe, but we were 700 years Moors. And that was a term initially relating to Muslims, but a term that was later used to refer to any and all blacks. We're talking with Romeo Joyner-EL. He's handling some business inside the office, but I think we're ready to get back to.
Yes, sir.
You all ready for me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I was just sharing, just summarizing some of the things we have talked about. But I would be remiss, big brother, if I didn't reference when we first met.
Oh, sure. Over at the good old city jail. And that place was a platform for me to really teach young people because I had the blessing of being an officer, a sergeant, and a lieutenant on what was called at that time the juvenile housing unit. And what I was responsible for daily was supervising the daily activities of the correctional officers and civilian personnel who had young men and women who were awaiting trial that were being tried as adults. Some of them were being waved down, meaning that they were going to the juvenile system, and some of them were being tried as adults. But the most interesting fact about all of them is that they were inner city children, usually from single family households, and they weren't always us. They were up from they came from all kinds of races and nationalities. But the one thing that I was really impressed with was their ability to see people as they were and not based on titles, labels, and reputations. Because with children, they're innocent souls, regardless of what titles society want to put on them. They're going to say what they hear, and they're going to do what they see. Now, one thing that made it easy for me to deal with them is because I was raised by my great grandparents, and I was always taught treat people the way you want them to treat you. So I never went into dealing with those young men and women. I didn't want to know what they were being charged with. I saw them as young people that needed help, guidance, and that was an opportunity for me to teach them, and I did. But in doing that, it was something I couldn't do by myself. So we had people like Mr. Donnie Glover, Mr. Kevin Lyles. So some of you are familiar with them. Mike Steele, Bernard Young, Russell Simmons,
Kenny
uh,
Harris.
Ken Harris. They were coming on the forefront. And when they showed up, and they were ready to deal with the brothers and sisters of that housing unit. And what I saw was young men and women that were crying out for help. They needed people.
So I want you get ready to make me cry, and I ain't gonna have that on the air. You can't do that. But when they come up to you years later,
that will make you cry.
Tell me about that experience. Give me a scenario.
Well, one of the things that happened with me, I work in the store on the weekends as well as working for healthcare for the homeless. And a lot of them would show up and said, hey, you don't remember me, but I was a young man on your unit, and we used to call you Mr. Joyner. At the time, I wasn't carrying the title Joyner-EL. And they used to call me Mr. He said, we called you Mr. because you was like our father. And I said, like your father? He said, yeah. He said, because you talked to us, you were stern, but we knew you cared about us. And he said, and I haven't been in any trouble, and I'm doing well. I have a job. I'm not married yet, but I got 2 children that I support. And to hear that, somebody say that to you after you seen them in not such a good place, that touches your heart. And I know Mr. Glover's had the same experience because in the neighborhood where he lives, a lot of those young men frequent, they come and they see him, they say, hey, man, you don't remember me. And they always thank you because their thank is so heartfelt because it's sincere. It's not made up. You can't make that up. You cannot practice that. It has to be sincere and coming from the heart. And that made the job. That made the job. Which goes back.
I wish, because we as a people deal with that criminal justice system so much.
Yes.
On behalf of people behind those walls, I thank you for serving with humanity.
Thank you. It's a blessing to have an opportunity to serve with humanity.
Oh, we can't not mention the boss lady. Don't get me in trouble now.
Miss Gwendolyn Oliver. Miss Gwen Oliver was the director of the juvenile housing unit, and she was a very caring person, and she saw the young children. She saw the young men and women as being children that just needed help. She didn't put titles and labels on them, and she went out of her way a lot of times. So sometimes I have to say, Miss Oliver, you really can't do that. You can't do that here. But she would try.
She was her when I so what is she doing now?
Well, she retired, and I think she was having some challenges,
But she was fearless on over there.
Anything that she wanted that you brought to her that was an out of a box idea, she was up for it. And to us, what most people don't know, we had a school there called the East Street Academy, School 370. It was the only one of the only only jail detention centers that had a school in it. And some of the brightest kids I've ever seen in my life were in that school. We had children that went up 2 or 3 grade point averages after being out of school for 2 years. And to give an example, one young man, he didn't go to school because he was raising his siblings that were younger than him. He was committing crime and doing things, so he didn't go to school. But when we got him in school, this guy was brilliant. He could read, he could write, he was a mathematician. He could recite poetry. This guy was a Renaissance man. And what wound up happening is that he took the SAT on the school grounds to get into college, and he did. He got in, and I was a part of that. The whole process from the IEPs and them struggling and saying all kinds of stuff. And they like, Mr. Lieutenant, you can't. I said, look, Mr. Officer said I can do it, and I'm going. We had graduate.
So look, right now we're doing more with this technology.
Yes.
And there are people who watch and who support this show who want to see us embrace technology even more.
Yes.
Even down to wearing these new goggles, these Oculus goggles. They call it the metaverse, which is essentially virtual reality. Do you think the young men behind the walls can handle this new technology?
Yes, they can. Yes, they can. They just need an opportunity. Yes, they can. They just need an opportunity to do so. Because where there's a will, there's a way.
Because so that was one of the first discussions that I had with Mr. Rudy Williams.
Yes. Another young brother that I know. I know him very well. And to see him now and to hear him speak about his plays was phenomenal. I was on yesterday's show for a while and I saw him. And that's one who can actually speak from life experiences and how his life can change. And if his life can change, that's a message for some other young people that their lives can change also. So
Any message? This is one last question.
Yes, sir.
Any message to the parents? Again, America is 5% of the world's population, yet we have 25% of the world's inmates. Some 40% or more are black men. And black women are the fastest growing demographic. And I just want to say this again. Black people make up 13, 15, maybe 20% of the population, because you never know, they lie so much.
Right.
But we're half of the prison population.
Yes. And the message that I could give to the parents is, if you don't invest in your children now, they'll be in the system later. And they're not going to invest in them the way you would as a parent. They're going to invest in them to be working for some very low wages and some very uncomfortable and unhealthy conditions. And they'll pretty much be in involuntary servitude. It doesn't have to happen.
But a lot, and we let's get specific. We have a lot of single mother households.
And
back in 1940, 1950.
Right. But here's the thing.
African American community may have been one of the most married communities in the world.
Right. But here's where the problem comes. No man can raise a girl to a woman. So we need a woman to do that. So when we don't have a woman in our house, we have to find somebody in the family or in the community to mentor that woman. No woman can raise a boy to a man. So we need to find a mentor or somebody in the community or family member who can mentor to that particular young man. So it's important that we do that now. We can't wait to do that later.
Listen,
go ahead.
We've stolen enough of your time. I'll just give you a chance to make any final thoughts. We have to bring you back. We hope that we at least began to open eyes to our actual history, despite the fact that America wants to erase.
Shut us down. Yeah.
I mean, that's like a drug addict. That's like a drug addict trying to get clean and never admitting, hey, I'm a drug addict.
Right. And we're not going away. We're not going away. One of the things
in the dope line by 12 o'clock.
Right. And one of the things I want to say is that when you bring people from all over the continent of Africa, because they just didn't take people from West Africa. That's another misnomer. People were sold by Arabs, their own people, and Europeans, and it's affected us all over the world. That's why you can find melanated people all over the world because of that slave trade. And we were
also around the world before that.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, one of my ancestors, and I have the history on him, his name was Ishmael Butts. He was here in 1755. 1755. Not 1776, 1755. Then we had some in 1555. We got the record. So they all weren't slaves.
On that note, I just want to say this. We make the assumption as Americans,
right,
that nothing was going on this continent until 1492.
Right. I got another one for you. Here's another piece that I want to give the people for the so-called Black History Month. Our relationship to the Native Americans.
Black Indians.
There you go. How did we get involved with that? Look up the Trail of Tears. Some of the so-called Native Americans were slaveholders. It's right in there.
Well, I also talk about those blacks that came out of Florida to Oklahoma.
There you go. See,
They may have been enslaved at one point, but they went
weren't
to
anymore.
Oklahoma as freemen because they were soldiers.
And you know why?
They fought in the Second Seminole War. So not all blacks on the Trail of Tears were slaves. Some of them were warlords. They were gladiators.
And them taken into families and made kings and chiefs.
Yeah.
You know that. We got, look, I can name the 3 tribes in my family. My father being from the Creek Nation, right? My mother from the Cherokee Nation, and mixed up with a whole lot of other stuff.
My daddy got Blackfoot. My mama got Taino.
My wife is Sioux. She's from the Sioux Nation. There were nations of people.
I gotta ask you this. We put up a video on YouTube of Black Indians. The thing went viral. It really went viral.
Yes.
On social, on the book, but there were so many people trying to say, man, this and the hurtful comments. I'm used to hurtful comments,
yes,
from other races.
But when it comes from your own people's mouth,
when your own people saying, "Why are you trying to embrace the Native Americans?"
Why not? It's a part of your history.
It's a part of my history.
It's a part of your history, just like it's a part of mine.
But
my great-great-grandfather, his name was Isom Kill. He was Cherakawa in Sioux.
So,
I said,
we look at his name, Skip Gates, Henry Louis Gates. He made a statement that only 2 to 3% of Black people have indigenous blood. And I said to myself, number one, have you talked to all Black people? How do you come up with that number? Number two, out of 10 Black people, over half of them that I've talked to, over half of the Black people that I have talked to,
right,
acknowledge some type of indigenous roots. And so all of that to say, don't let nobody tell you what your history is. Go and do your own research. Learn for yourself. Don't let nobody tell you who you are.
Don't let them do that to you.
Yeah. Romeo, we thank you for taking time out. I know you're busy helping people.
Okay.
Do you want to tell them what you do now?
Yeah, I'm currently working for Healthcare for the Homeless as a case manager, 421 Falls Way. Great work here, wonderful people. You have to be a labor of love, but it's worth it. If you need any resources, 421 Falls Way. We'll be glad to help you. Thank you, Mr. Glover.
Thank you for being a true Baltimorean, a true son. Thank you for being a big brother to me. Thank you for supporting me and our efforts over there with the Love for El Prison Ministry.
That's right.
14 to 17-year-olds. I acknowledge former mayor, but then Councilman Bernard Jack Young. He came over there with us. Brian Easley came over with us. Ken Harris came over with us. I'm sure there were some others, but I'll never forget Bernard Jack Young because I lean on Jack.
He's a good brother.
For it. And also
what another one of Baltimore's brightest sons.
Yes, sir.
Keep up the good work, Donnie.
Yes, sir. We love you.
Much love for you, brother, man. Love you, young brother.
Yes, sir.
Okay, be peaceful. Peace.
Folks, we'll be back at 7 p.m. tonight for another show. Conference room conversations. I might have messed that up. Carla Nelson and Michelle Howard. Actually, Carla's going to be taking a break tonight. Michelle Howard will be in there running the show. Donnie Glover signing out. Be nice. Stay warm. Check on your seniors. Let me say this. It doesn't take anything to pick up the phone and make that call to a senior. Somebody might be in a nursing home or in hospice, or they might be living alone. I know the world is changing. We got a microwave mentality now. But pick up the phone. Call your loved ones. Check on them. If you can forgive, forgive. Does more for you than the person you forgive. Forgive. Let it go. You don't want to carry around darkness and grudges and as I talk to you, I minister to myself. Let it go. Forgive. You got too much work to do. You want your hands open to get those blessings. You don't want them closed up where you can't get your blessings because you holding on to dumb stuff. Let it go. Let it go. I got to take this German Shepherd out before he let it go. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you to all of our sponsors. Thank you to William Honolulu, who does a marvelous job with the morning show, promoting all of our sponsors. John Anderson, we were talking about him earlier today. Sheriff is running for re-election. Darker Than Blue Grill. Do check them out. 413 North Charles Street. Edible Arrangements. Ask for Kevin Setzer. They have 3 locations, 2 here in Baltimore. Also, Billy Murphy, Murphy Falcon and Murphy. Bishop Barry, Best Pest Control in Maryland. He's also in D.C., Pennsylvania, New Jersey. Next Phase Cafe. Joe Mans Awards. Say a prayer for Joe Mans. Joe Mans had a stroke. I don't know if it's necessarily people want it to be known out there, but check on Josh over at Joe Mans Awards. Give him encouragement. Lift up his spirits. And I think that's everybody for now. Again, also special thank you to STEM City USA. This show is in the metaverse. Get your Oculus goggles out and make it happen. I've seen people doing all kinds of fancy things, including workouts. I'm still learning the darn things, waiting on a one-on-one session. Or I guess I better pull up that YouTube video that has been suggested. But thank you again for your support of this network. Do check out blackusa.news. Do check out our mothership, bemorenews.com. The news before the news, where we uncover the truth. Donnie Glover signing out. We'll be back later tonight. And if you want a show, then just email us, editor@blackusa.news. We're always looking for good shows around the country. We're soliciting a couple of key people around the country, including this wonderful lady down in Atlanta. I think the world of her. And hopefully I'll have more to report to you in the coming days. We're trying to recruit, definitely trying to recruit this lady. She's big in business, well connected up and down the East Coast and across. If you have a show idea, you want to come on once a week, 1 hour a week, you can. If you can commit to 1 hour a week or more, then we'd like to have a conversation with you. My name's Donnie Glover. Be nice.